broadcasting live from the Valley of the Sun, Phoenix, Arizona, in the heart of the great American Southwest. It's Erskine Overnight. Now, here's Erskine.
It's Erskine Overnight, and we're very fortunate to have with us, more fortunate than you might realize, Mr. Robert Chapman, the international forecaster. And what he does is presents the truth. And the truth is certainly hard to find these days. It's not in the managed news services, which is owned by the elites. That's a key factor to know. The news services are owned by the elites. When you're looking and reading the International Forecaster, one of the things that jumped out at me was the fact that, and he listed this in the February 12th edition, it began in Tunisia as CIA MI6 Mossad operation due to poverty, lack of food, and rising costs. And then from there it went to Egypt, where Mubarak stole close to $70 billion and left with 1.5 tons of gold. You didn't hear that on any other news services. Now, is this an MI6 Mossad CIA operation? This seems to have spread way beyond what they wanted around the world to where we're even having demonstrations in Wisconsin spreading to Ohio, basically because the state's trying to cut back on some of its obligations, which they can't survive otherwise. Mr. Chapman, is this something that got out of hand on the powers that be?
Well, in the Middle East, yes. The idea was to divert people's thinking toward the financial and economic problems in the United States, England, and Europe. And as you know, they're manifest. You just mentioned the problems in Wisconsin and Ohio with the demonstrations. And then also you have the states which are in dire problems as well, and the municipal bond market that's in horrible shape. And then you have the Fed buying most of the, if not all, of the Treasury bonds that are being issued, as well as going into the market, and agency bonds, which are Fannie, Freddie, Ginnie, and FHA. Over in England, they admit to 4.5% inflation, so that means inflation's 12%. In Europe, they're getting worried about inflation. It's now over 2%, 2.2%, that they admit to. That number would probably be somewhere around 7 to 8%. And so they wanted a diversion from that, and they wanted to get rid of Mubarak anyway because he wouldn't go along with the invasion of Iran. And yes, he did steal $70 billion, which I think they're going to get back, or a good part of it. And it was the fellow who ran away from the Tunisian government with his wife who took the 1.5 tons of gold with him. How much gold Mubarak took, I don't know. And so now it's spreading, as you pointed out, in Libya, which is probably a good thing. Jordan, which has very weak leadership and takes all its direction from London and Washington. And then you have Bahrain, which got pretty nasty, and Yemen. And I expect many more countries to have similar problems, especially the ones in South and Central America that have communist governments. First of all, Nicaragua, especially Venezuela, and then that's followed by Bolivia and Ecuador. In Bolivia last week, the people, they were so mad at the communist president that they were throwing lit sticks of dynamite at him. And so when they get it together, they get it together. I mean, they're really serious. But this is going to spread all over the world. And,
well, in Argentina, I think it's the women who had pots and pans that's caused the revolution over there. So it certainly is spreading. But when you're looking at it, if prices of food keep going up, if they start cutting back on pensions of all the municipal workers, that sort of thing, then we're starting to have a taste of it here. We haven't got full-blown, but it could come here, is what you've been saying. We certainly could have it if inflation gets out of control and you're predicting 14% inflation this year, hyperinflation 2012. And the other factor is the unemployment figures don't look any better. All these QE1s and QE2s and all this stimulus money, for all the money that was spent, none of it seemed to help the unemployment, did it?
Well, I think you're right, and I think it's going to run along those lines. And I think it probably will take into next year, maybe a little longer, and it'll then manifest itself in a big way in the United States. And it'll start off with peaceful demonstrations like you're watching now. And hungry people do unusual things. And if they bring those robo-cops in, who are under the command of the federal government, there's going to be a problem because the police are in a intractable situation. The public's mad at them, and the government's pushing them. And I wouldn't want to be a police officer under those circumstances because they're liable to get it from both sides. And so it's headed there. The timing, I don't try to do. I just know that it looks like we're going to have some serious trouble in America, never mind in the third world, in second world, where food prices are a real problem. And in some places, even the production of food is a problem. You take Venezuela, they're net importers of food. That's hard to believe, but they are. And they're very vulnerable. And so, and then, you know, we've had these freezes, southwest United States, got virtually their whole crop wiped out. In northern Mexico, Sonora, Sinaloa, which are bread baskets from Mexico, they got it all frozen out. And most of that stuff is exported to the United States. And so they have loss of income, and then on top of that, they have the shortage of food. Most of that shortage will show up in the United States.
The other thing that you talk about is how the Federal Reserve has destroyed capital structure and the dollar. And that's the advantage. You have 2 issues a week of the International Forecaster. I don't know how you do it, but 2 a week, Wednesdays and Saturdays. They come in my email, and each issue is about 30 pages plus long. You've got links to all of the stories at the end, so if you want to follow up on the story you're saying to yourself, this just can't be, you've got the links that show you exactly where you got your information. You've got readers all over the world, in every corner of the world, who send you information. You've got health information in here. It is absolutely chock full. And the key to it is, that's even more remarkable, is Ted Anderson's offering this for free. How can that be? You just buy a piece of gold and you get a year's subscription for free? So he's not asking you to buy 10 ounces of gold, just one piece of gold, and he'll give you the International Forecaster for a year for free. That's a great deal, isn't it?
It certainly is. Ted is very generous, and he just wants people to get into gold and silver or add to what they've got. And that was a wonderful idea. And it's worked out quite well.
Do you have the number real handy to call, the number to call?
Yes, I do. I haven't hid it away someplace. That number, which is my number, 877-479-8178. That's 877-479-8178, and you can get a free copy of either the email or the hard copy version of the forecaster.
We'll be right back. To get either a free copy or to get a year free of the International Forecaster, a year free, you buy one piece of gold and you've got a free year's subscription to the International Forecaster. If you don't own gold, you've got a major problem, gold or silver. The number is 877-479-8178. I'm not being paid anything to say this. It's what you need to do, what you want to do. 877-479-8178. 877-479-8178. You need this. You absolutely need it. The elitists own the media. They own the Fed. They own 95% of Congress and most of the judicial. But when we're looking at changes that are happening, you're saying 14% inflation. The Fed's almost finished, isn't it? The Federal Reserve, the arm of the elitists, it's almost done, isn't it? Their fraud, their theft, their criminality, isn't it almost finished? Is there much that the Federal Reserve can really do right now, Mr. Chapman?
No. They're in a blind alley. And Matt Tabliti wrote an article this week, in which we have the link to, in the Forecaster for tomorrow. And he said that the title is, "Why Aren't These People on Wall Street in Jail?" And I have an interview that Dylan Ratigan did on MSNBC, where he discusses the same thing. And I've been talking about it for many, many years. And the two-sided justice that exists in Washington and New York, particularly in reference to the CFTC and the Commodity Futures Trading Corporation. You know, we have people like Goldman Sachs. They stole $5 billion. And so they said, okay, we're guilty. Now, you would think that the SEC would say, okay, we want the $5 billion back and we'll fine you $500 million. They didn't do that. They fined them $500 million, and they let them keep the rest of it. So crime pays. Warren Buffett, his firm, Berkshire Hathaway, they cheated the government out of $300 million. Now, you would have thought that the Securities Exchange Commission would have made them give the $300 million back to the government and then fined them perhaps $100 million. They didn't do that. They fined them $100 million and let them keep the other $200 million. And this sort of thing goes on and on and on. It just doesn't end.
And who went to prison on any of these? Who went to prison on any of these things? Did anybody? No. The only person we know that went to prison was Bernie Madoff. Nobody was charged. Nobody went to prison.
He didn't belong to the Illuminati. And so, that's what happens. And, people talk about inflation. I've got new figures this morning. And under the old 1990 pre-Clinton rules for the inflation figures, CPI as it's known, inflation right now is over 5%. Now, if you use the 1980 figures, inflation is over 9%. So I'm quoting inflation now at 7%. I'll middle the thing. And it's certainly not 1.5%, I'll tell you that. And so
and we also know, as you've been saying, Mr. Chapman, that unemployment's nowhere near 9% either.
No, it's not. No, the real unemployment is 22.6%. If you use U6, which is 16 3/8%, and you extract the birth-death ratio, which is the birth of and the death of businesses throughout the country, supposedly that the government can't report on, so they guess at it. And, of course, the guesses are always in their direction. And so that's the kind of reporting you get there. It's all lies. It's incredible. But that's the way it is. And this is what happens.
Anybody who's been to what's happened with prices, and let me give you a rundown of a few prices from Official Forecaster. The source was indexmundi.com. 6 months sugar up 81%, rice 12%, wheat 67%, soybeans 37%, coffee 28%, barley 25%, beef 28%, crude oil 24%, cotton 131%, coarse wool 30%, fine wool 69%, gold 13%, silver 59%, copper 41%, aluminum 22%. You get the picture. And they're telling people that we really don't have inflation, and Bernanke's telling people it isn't a problem. Those are actual figures. How can they bold-faced lie to people who are going to the grocery store every day and just look at them with a straight face and say, we've got inflation whipped, it's under control, this is nothing we have to worry about? How can they honestly keep doing that, Mr. Chapman?
Well, they are psychopaths, and some of them are psychopaths as well. And whatever fits is okay by them. They make up the lies, and they believe them. And they don't care about the public. And it's being reflected in the commodity markets because you're seeing a flight to quality. And they're also suppressing gold and silver prices, and have been since 1988. If they hadn't been...
They have to be. When you have the disruption that's happening in Egypt, you have all the inflation that's occurring, all the problems that the dollar's had, and yet gold and silver prices actually go down. When you did a story and you said Goldman Sachs was shorting the silver market, you knew they were going to manipulate it down at that point, didn't you?
That's right, but it was also J.P. Morgan Chase and HSBC who were the biggest of the three players along with Citi. And now there's a conglomeration of class action lawsuits, one of which is a RICO, which has been brought together, and they're going to adjudicate from there. But I know exactly what Morgan's going to do. Now, Morgan is the biggest shareholder of the Federal Reserve. So they and the other players I just mentioned own the Fed. There are other owners, too, but they're the main ones. Now, what they're going to do is say, look, the government told us to do that, so that's why we did it. So we should be held harmless. And people probably aren't going to get anything, but what it will do, it will stop the manipulation of the silver market and the gold market. And that's what I'm hoping for. But the criminality is so bad and so deep, so systemic, that the only way you can root it out is by getting everybody out of office practically, by stopping
almost all of them,
contributions and lobbying.
More when we get back on Erskine Overnight. Those of us who live in Phoenix, Maricopa County, or Scottsdale, or Glendale, we know what's going on, what's happening. And we congratulate what our governor's doing. May not approve of everything she's doing, but she is countersuing the feds over immigration. They're refusing to obey or follow their own laws. Maine, they're rescinding sanctuary. Florida, they're going into E-Verify for jobs. The illegal child welfare is costing, child welfare only, $600 million in L.A. County. Total cost to L.A. County, $1.6 billion. This illegal immigration is not something that to be taken lightly. It's breaking the cities. And as one person said, it can no longer be the HMO to the world. The cost to California last year, $21.8 billion. In addition, we had in the last 2 years over 1 million foreign people come into the U.S. for jobs that are highly skilled jobs that they say they can't find Americans to do. I have lots of trouble believing that. So you've got 1 million people coming into a country with a huge, over 20% unemployment. You've got illegals coming in, costing California alone $21.8 billion. The American people are just fed up with this, Mr. Chapman, don't you believe?
Well, I think they are, and rightly so. And it's going to continue because the federal government has no intention of, quote, getting rid of the illegal aliens. I lived in California for 36 years, and I left in 1994. and I moved to Florida at that time. And I wrote an article, and I went into detail like you just did, of why California could not survive financially, here we are 15 years later, with a terrible debt that's been going for about 5 years. It's been noticeable. And in Southern California alone, 40% of the people are illegal, and most of them don't pay taxes. They use the system, as you pointed out. They bankrupted the state. And the same thing has happened in Arizona, which has sold some of its public buildings and leased them back just to get money to stay in business. And so it's going to continue to be bad. And the people who come into the country, they're not bad people, they're good people. They just want a better life and be able to make a living. In fact, in Mexico, from which most of them come from, unemployment's 5.4%. And this past year, the GDP increased 7.5%, and inflation's running probably around 4%. Now, the gains in GDP will be less this year, probably 4.5%, and inflation will stay around 4.5%. And unemployment will probably stay at the same level. But one of the reasons for that is essentially they dumped about 17 million people on the United States. As a result, more than anything else, of NAFTA, because it destroyed the farming communities. And the people who worked in the farms in Mexico either had no education or at best 6 years. It's a cultural thing. And they all headed El Norte. And lo and behold, there they are in Phoenix and L.A. and so on and so forth. And were they to be sent back, at this point in time, Mexico could handle that pretty easily because the economy is doing very well compared to the United States. In fact, doing better than Canada for that matter. So
I think there are a number of the Mexicans actually, Mr. Chapman, I think are going back on their own because they just simply can't find work here, and a lot of them are really, let's be honest about it, a lot of them are very good, hardworking people who came over for a better opportunity, for a better life that they didn't think they had at home. A lot of them are, I can certainly sympathize with them, but I can't sympathize being American here. It isn't fair to us, but I can certainly see they had valid reasons for coming. Let's put it that way.
And that's a good way to put it. And it's the people who control our government who want people to work for slave wages. These are the same people who have pushed for the World Trade Organization and NAFTA and CAFTA and the doing away with tariffs, which protected our country for years because we had a much higher standard of living. And now these transnational corporations are making a fortune, and all the profits are kept offshore. Almost $2 trillion is sitting offshore. It's never been taxed. And they're trying to bring it back. Instead of paying 35% tax, they want to pay 5.25%. Again, they did this 5 years ago. Only the number was $350 billion. If they bring back $2 trillion at 5.25%, the American taxpayer will lose $670 billion in tax receipts. And our government stands by and lets these corporations screw us right into the ground. Well, it's the same people who want this slave labor in the country. And that's what they're doing. And it's got to be stopped.
They have no loyalty whatsoever. However, if you're talking about a fascist state, that essentially is when the government is ruled of, by, and for corporations, and they become one and the same. And it looks like it's very, very close to that. And the poor people from Mexico, many of them very hardworking, very good people, most of them, in fact. 90% of them, and they're using them. They're using the American workers. They're destroying the unions. The other thing that I wanted to bring up, and I found it to be an exceptional story that you wrote in the International Forecaster, was one on ethanol and biodiesel fuel. This was going to be the salvation. It was going to be the end-all. Then they found out that ethanol is hard on rubber gaskets. It promotes rust, 4.4% water. Even you can't run a car on pure ethanol because if you try it, it just simply won't start. And they're using up corn at an unbelievable rate. How can we afford to put food into our cars to run it? We really can't in the world today with people starving. We're putting food into our cars to run it? That doesn't make any sense at all, Mr. Chapman.
Well, the 80% plus, the ethanol is produced by ADM, Archer Daniels Midland. And the family that owns that is a large, very powerful Illuminati family. And that's why they've got what they've got. And that's why Congress passed a very large tax break so that ethanol would be competitive. And that makes Mr. Wayne Andrews and his family very happy. But it takes 1/3 of the entire corn crop. Now, I know they grow different kind of corn for ethanol, but all they have to do is pull that out and put the other kind of corn in.
Meanwhile, our reserve is at the lowest in 15 years. We'll be right back with Robert Chapman, the International Forecaster. When you see states like Arizona challenging the federal government, suing them over immigration, you see states like Maine rescinding sanctuary, states like Florida doing E-Verify. You see states coming up and doing their own we don't want Obamacare and opting out, and they are doing that. And the federal judge overturning it in Virginia when they bring forth states are bringing forth this. States are beginning to exert their rights under the 10th Amendment. We're getting back to the Constitution and to the country as it was set up, of the states having the power and not the federal government telling the states what to do, but the states having more and more power. This is a good thing, potentially, in my opinion. Comments on that, please, Mr. Chapman.
Overall, absolutely. And it's very important that people know that things are being done. And that's why when I do the radio work we do, so we can blast out all over the world what's happening, and the reality of what's happening, particularly in the United States. And so people can understand who is causing them all these problems and what the end result is, the attention of these people who are behind the scenes. And so, yes, you're right. The world is turning. Americans are finally trying to do something. I'm disappointed they weren't more successful in the last election of getting rid of their incumbents. And now we've got a group in, Tea Partiers, who voted this past week to extend the Patriot Act till December. In the Senate, they came up with a shorter period. I think it was April or May, I guess it was. And this is exactly, they said they wouldn't do. And so here they've been there, well, at that time, 20 days, and they'd already been bought and paid for. It's a disgrace to our country that something like this can exist where you can buy whatever you want. The system's just as bad. And I don't even want to get into that because I've seen it up close, and it's not nice to look at.
No, not when you vote people in with a set. Do they have no principles? I watched Mr. Smith Goes to Washington. We don't have any Mr. Smiths. Well, maybe we do with a couple, Ron Paul and maybe Dennis Kucinich, a couple of others. But basically, we don't have a Mr. Smiths today, do we?
No, because the world has changed dramatically. What have you done for me lately? How much will I make out of it? They've lost their moorings in America. Morality reality very often doesn't exist. It's just disgusting. And incidentally, it's worldwide. It's just not America. I travel extensively, and I speak the languages of many of the countries that I go to. And, you sit around in a restaurant, listen to people talk, and you know where they're coming from. And
plus, you've got subscribers from all over the world, too. You have subscribers to the International Forecaster from all over the world, because every issue you've got people from, well, virtually every state, but then you have people from foreign countries who are writing you. Otherwise, you wouldn't know that in China, the inflation rate runs from 5 to 35%, depending on the province. China's importing 1,000 tons of gold this year, 1,000 tons of gold. The upside for gold with inflation is 100% lock. But when you see them importing 1,000 tons of gold, you see the world turning toward gold. You say, what's the percentage of Americans? Are we looking at gold now? If we aren't, we sure should be, shouldn't we?
That's right. And that's why I keep the subscribers up to date. As a matter of fact, we just recommended a new stock, and any of you listeners who would like the information on that, all you have to do is email me at Bob, B-O-B, at intforecaster.com. That's Bob at INTFORECASTER.com. And I'll send you that and all the other ones if you'd like.
Oh, listen, let me make a little comment in here, Bob, if you don't mind. And that is the stocks and the recommendations that you've made on gold and silver have made the difference between me making money and not making money. His recommendations are, to paraphrase it, they're gold. They really are. You have done some absolutely phenomenal work. And I've got to tell you, my wife and I certainly appreciate. Now, that's coming from the heart. That's not being paid to say it or anything else. You've made me money like nobody else. The International Forecaster and you and your recommendations have made me money. It's made a major difference in my life. And today, if you can stay ahead of inflation, if you can preserve your capital, that should be the new goal. If you can get ahead of it, as I've done with your recommendations, that's even better. So I thank you, and I know you get letters all the time from your subscribers thanking you for keeping them whole and keeping them ahead of the game, because a lot of people would be in a sorry shape if they hadn't listened to you. We better be listening on this gold and silver, shouldn't we?
You should. It's the only way to go, whether it's coins, bullion, or shares, or all three, whatever's suitable for you, what you can afford. And be sure and put in freeze-dried and dehydrated foods, because more people are going to get laid off. And you should have a filter that's built to brackish water and be able to defend your family if things get nasty.
Get the lead in your guns, get the lead out of your water, and get you some freeze-dried foods. That's issues number 1, 2, and 3. And then get some gold and silver. It's not too late. Silver's still only $30 an ounce. Only. Whoa. Now, the U.S. isn't alone. This is happening all over the world, and China's having the same sort of problem. In China, they've got a same U.S. and China producer price index is over 14%. To subscribe to the International Forecaster, I've got to give you this number one more time. Get your pencil out. 877-479-8178. It not only will tell you what's going on, but as Mr. Chapman says, it can make you money. Follow some of his recommendations. You will make money. I'm telling you, I have made money, and you will make money. Bob, what stories are you looking at coming up for this next issue or two?
Well, I've been writing about the Federal Reserve and the possibilities for inflation for the future. Also about the municipal problems, the problems in Europe, the problems in the Middle East. I try to tie it all together. And I only write about 8 pages of editorial because I'm so limited on time doing as many programs as I do. And I do it all in longhand, so and I think everything through, so it's different than what most people do in my position. Anyway, those are the things that are happening and will continue to happen. Government is going to continue to try to tax people to death, and you're going to see all kinds of taxes, and you're going to end up paying, on average, probably 21 cents in income tax. Now, I know a lot of people are in higher brackets than that, but there's a lot of people who don't make enough money to pay taxes. And so taxes are going to be right around the corner, up from 14. So even though they passed that tax continuation, which they loaded with pork, for a total of $862 billion, most of which is now exhausting itself because they rushed it into the economy. I think by June, we're going to see higher interest rates, and we're going to see more pressure on the economy in a recovery that never happened. And
they're also talking about raising the retirement age on Social Security just as the boomers start to hit the retirement, which is not surprising.
Well, I've been beat them to the punch on that. I started collecting 10 years ago. But I figured without interest, I would have to live to be 105 to collect what I put into it.
Well, my grandmother lived to be 107, but I'm not counting on that for you or myself. I wish you would. I wish you would. The number to call is subscribe to the International Forecaster. Buy one piece of gold, and you get subscription free. 877-479-8178. Mr. Chapman, I want to thank you for being on, and we've got some positives. One of the positives is that I'm seeing states take more and more initiative. Another positive is that when George Soros says that you've got to watch out for Fox News, Glenn Beck, and the Tea Party, somebody's getting to them somewhere, aren't they?
You better believe it.
Let's keep the pressure on them, and thank you so much, my friend, and please, please subscribe to the International Forecaster. It not only will help you preserve your money, it will make you money. It's worked for me. Thank you, Robert Chapman. You're the best. We'll be right back.
Well, you're welcome, and thank you all for listening.
Yes, sir.
I would like to thank Osman for doing such a great job, and my webmaster, Dave, who puts these programs up there where you can listen at ErskineOnRadio.com, ERSKINE on radio.com. If you write to me, I'll write you back. Thanks for listening. Till next week, sweet dreams.